This one is for interest, but also for shame. I'm just so nosy and like, I need to know. And so he, gets on his horse and he's coming to town. Somebody left a fun comment asking if I could look back on my most anticipated lists and talk about the success of each one with the books that I have actually read. This book was so powerful, I recommend it to everyone. Love might be the only way to survive. Hello friends, it's Kayla. As you might know, my channel members have been deciding the order of my content. So the next video idea that got the most amount of votes is the one where I read my most anticipated books from every year since I started my channel. I made this reaction video. I'll link it down below so you can go ahead and watch this first. It's important to watch this first. See my response to all of my anticipated books, and then 2 videos come after this. We've got this video right here where I pick a book from each year and I read them and I review them, and then after this, probably a couple months from now, I will go through the comments and pick 6 of your like top rated, voted selections to read in part 3. I know within that video I kind of built a TBR. I don't want to go back and see what that was. I want to just go off of vibes. In this moment, March 2022, what am I actually in the mood to read? Because I know that the #1 thing that you would vote for me to do is, if there's a choice between reading something I want to read and reading something that's just for a video, you are voting for my well-being. You want me to be happy. You want me to read things that I'm interested in. I know that about you. I love that about you. I'm rarely looking out for myself, so I'm glad that there's someone who is. What I do have on my phone is the little graphics that I made that tell me the options that I have. So I'm gonna go through this, and I have no doubt that I probably will end up picking the same things that I have already selected, but I just feel like I'm more in control and I have the power. I'm taking the power back from myself. Let's start with 2016. I only have 3 books to choose from, which is so exciting. And it makes sense because the longer ago than my most anticipated videos were, the more likely that I've actually read the books. 2 of these I've removed from my TBR entirely, but the only one remaining, and the one that I want to read, is A World Without You by Beth Revis. This one is for interest, but also for shame, because this is a book I got in a book box, and it's annotated, which is something I'm very into, like thinking about, hearing about the author's thoughts as they're writing different things, like little insights into the characters or whatever. I feel like this was one of my first Bookstagram photos too. I'll show it to you here. I remember trying to line up the rug with the book lines, and I don't think this is up anymore. I'm gonna have to look in my archives. But it says, 17-year-old Beau has always had the delusion that he can travel through time. Beau assumes he knows the truth, that he's actually attending Berkshire Academy, a school for kids who, like Beau, have superpowers. Similar to maybe Challenger Deep. For 2017, the only option is My So-Called Perfect Life, which is a book that you have pointed out to me before that I accidentally bought 2 copies of. And I actually don't think it super sounds the most intriguing at this point in my life, but I've had a recent like revival with me and Sophie Kinsella, so I think it could go well. And I'm just super intrigued by this. I don't think it's even on my shelves anymore. It's gotta be in the closet. Okay, let's talk 2018. We have a lot of options. So on my shelves, I have almost all of these, and I understand why in the moment I was interested in them. But the only one I'm currently gravitating towards would be 9 Perfect Strangers, because I want to watch the show, and then Unburied Carol. And I recently grabbed Unburied Carol from my mom. I lent it to her a while ago. I don't remember if she liked it, but I'm so intrigued, and I definitely want this video to be a mix of genres. I don't just want to read like some contemporary stuff, so this makes the most sense as a selection because it's like a Sleeping Beauty inspired adult horror. Now, 2019 releases, we also have a lot of stuff that I don't think I would ever read now. So I actually think I am so far sticking with the TBR that I built in the other video, if I'm remembering it correctly, but I'm gonna pick The Weight of Our Sky. This is a kind of historical story, so that'll mix it up a bit, by Hannah Alcaff, I think. She has something else coming out soon, so I want to read this too. Oh yeah, I just got an arc of Queen of the Tiles. I totally forgot. That's how I know this author. It's set in 1969. Racial tension boils over in Kuala Lumpur, and there is a bit of mythology in here. So I think that'll be a really interesting read. Now, for 2020, there is a lot here. And it's hard. There's like thriller, mystery, contemporary, romance, anthologies. This is the one that I like am ashamed I haven't read yet. It's called This Is All Your Fault by Amina May Safi. This is about saving a bookstore. but I've read a couple other books in this vein and like just didn't like them. And finally, we've got 2021. The book that I originally selected, I remember now, I actually am reading for a different video. So I'm stuck between a couple of things that I own, but to ensure I have a mix of genres, and because I really need to return this to the library, I'm gonna read The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schrafer, which I know you would all vote for, and I think did vote for in that video. So I'm just gonna go ahead and read it now. I need some sci-fi in my life. I feel like I've really been lacking in good queer stories too, to be honest. I know it's also risky because YA sci-fi hit or miss, but we're just gonna do it. Okay, I have all my picks. This is quite possibly the ugliest looking spine combination I've read in a video, and I don't know how I'm gonna promote it on Instagram. But we've got a mix of horror, sci-fi, historical, and then just some contemporary. This one is basically about a social media obsessed world and a love story at the workplace, a witty critique of false judgment. If you're sad about any of my selections, like, that's okay, because the point is that these are my selections and I already know that you have other preferences because you commented about them. So in your video, I will pick your selections. And I'm just excited to knock 6 books off my TBR that have been here for some of them many years. I don't think this is going to be a super busy or involved vlog since my last one was, and I think my next one will be. So it's just going to be chill, and I'm only going to check in with you pretty much when I complete each book and I can tell you my thoughts. Okay, are you ready to hear about my first book? Does this give you a hint? I thought, okay, well, I'm not vlogging. I'm not giving the people anything interesting in this video. So here's what will keep them coming back: my fashion. I thought I'd try to find a way to match the book that I read with my outfit in each review. I've never had a better idea. So I read The Darkness Outside Us, and I love it. Okay, but the squeaky "I love it" may not indicate the tone of this, because like part of you might think it's a nice YA romance in space. It's not. It's depressing, and it's about loneliness. Basically, this person is chosen as the first person to go to Saturn's moon. She goes missing, and now other people have been chosen, one of them being her brother, to go find her. There's a reason that like 17-year-olds are chosen. It has something to do with radiation not affecting them as greatly, which I honestly think did this book a disservice. I think this should have been adult. There's no reason why these characters couldn't have been in their mid-20s, and it could have been even more like high stakes, because I feel like a lot of space stuff in YA, the authors, like, you know for a fact they're never gonna go like there, like too dark, too deadly, and I feel like it really could have. I gave it a 4. Highly recommend. I do think that even people who don't traditionally read YA can definitely enjoy this. It's got some really sophisticated situations going on. The space science, I can't say is realistic, but it like sounds smart, and it was fun to read. And it had some really good reveals that I've said before are real good for me. So basically these 2 guys are on this ship. It's a sentient ship, so the ship like knows all Illuminae vibes. Our main character narrating is Ambrose, and there's like a second part of the ship and it's sealed from him, and he finds out that on the other side of the ship is this guy named Kodiak, and they both have to like consent for the doors to be opened, but like they don't both agree to meeting each other. And I honestly feel like that portion of the book could have gone on a little bit longer, and I would have liked it. It would have given a little more tension if it went on a little longer, because then as a reader we could also like start to question, is there even a person there? But no, like they meet pretty early on and they have to put their brains together and figure out at first like how they even got there, because their memories are a little confused, and then how to accomplish their mission, and then from there they have a whole different problem to solve, because they find out that things are not as they seem, as is the case with many a space book. This line that says love might be the only way to survive is not it, and it's not about their relationship, but their relationship definitely added something enjoyable to the story, something that you felt like you could root for. I felt really strongly about both of these characters. I really enjoyed this like kind of countdown element in the book. The ending was a little bit cheesy, but the reveals made up for it. So yeah, 4, maybe 4.5 out of 5. And now from here, I wonder if I should go in order. Since I started with my 2021 book, maybe I can go backwards from here and do my 2020 next. And something that would be good to talk about, I think, with each book is like why I didn't read it in the moment. So for this one, it came out in a time where I was feeling like weird about YA sci-fi because I've liked so many and I've hated so many, and all the ones that have been recommended to me, like, they just didn't pan out for me in the end, especially the ones that were compared to Illuminae, because I love Illuminae so much. And so this one I was just waiting for more reviews to come in, and then I ended up reserving it from the library a couple times, and it just never got bumped to the top of my TBR. Do I regret that now? A little bit, because 2021 wasn't a great reading year for me in general, so like this would have been a good read, especially with all the space stuff that I wasn't loving. But like it wouldn't have ended up in my favorites of the year. It might have ended up in a favorites of the quarter, so like there was the opportunity to have more people have this recommended to them and have them read it. I'm glad to have read it now. I think it's a good one. I would be really interested in him writing some other spacey stuff and adult stuff, so I'll definitely keep an eye out for this author in the future. Awesome, next book. Okay, I have time to update you before I finish this. I'm halfway through This Is All Your Fault. I don't have a polo or a coral jacket or a cute aqua colored t-shirt, but I thought this was close enough, even though right now I think this is my least favorite character. So we've got Imogen, we've got Daniela, and we have Rin. It's interesting because they all look pretty like, I don't know, like they've got an attitude. And I think that's appropriate because they're like supposed to be saving this bookstore. And that takes like a badass girl attitude. But our main girl here is Rin, and she is like a social media influencer, bookstagrammer girl, and she's apparently like the most bubbly girl you've ever met. She's just so hyped on life and is just so excited to do everything. So I definitely thought the vibe would be a little bit different. She has 200,000 followers, and most of what she's talking about regarding her like existence in the book community and like sponsorship conversations she's having, like it generally checks out. So that's cool, and she thinks that she can save the bookstore by just telling her followers to come shop there. I don't think that's going to check out and work in her favor, but basically they think at the beginning of the book there's like these rumors that the bookstore is going to shut down, and so now they need to do everything they can to save it. But it's not in the way that I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like they need to put on different fundraisers and they need to run different events and they need to like put their minds together and work together for the first time because maybe they don't get along, and that was going to be the vibe. But it's more so like somebody made an error at the company and now they all are like learning about it. So the first half of the book has just been them like figuring stuff out. There's a lot of like interpersonal relationship, crushes on each other, just like workplace dynamics, so that's fine. But we've still got a good chunk to go. I'll check in with you when I'm done. My overall thoughts on this one, I feel like I'm gonna give it a 3. It's so interesting because back in like 2018, Amina May Safi tweeted about her next book like being inspired by Empire Records. But those tweets are now deleted, and any reference to Empire Records is like completely missing from anywhere besides every single review that I read. So I'm just so nosy and like I need to know, is it that it was supposed to be inspired by Empire Records but they wouldn't allow like their name to be attached to it or didn't want it to be referenced by the publisher or anywhere? Or did the book like change as she was writing it and it got further away from Empire Records so she didn't feel like she wanted to reference it? Or did the publisher think that it would be like a hindrance to the sales if it was pitched as like a retelling of Empire Records? I haven't seen Empire Records, but it's just so funny how every single review talks about it, how it's just like a clear retelling, or in some cases people will say it's a ripoff of Empire Records. I'm just now deciding my April members only movie night. If you don't know, I have a channel membership. click the little button, you can join. It doesn't really work in the YouTube app, so you have to like do it on a browser or desktop or whatever. But every other month this year, we're doing live shows where we watch a movie together. Later in the year, I'm thinking Donnie Darko and Disturbia will pop up. I've just been loving rewatching things, but I think we really need to do one that I'm watching for the first time, so I'm going to do a poll pretty soon here. And I think Empire Records will be one of the options, because every time I mention it, people get mad at me that I haven't seen it. And I wonder if it would make me like this more or like this less if I were to compare it, because recently I read a Grease retelling that didn't go well. Anyway, right now it's a 3. I thought it was fine, as I say with so many books. There was a lot going on, almost too much going on. I don't think we needed 3 main characters, because one of them just like didn't get as much development or like personality. And then there were so many different romances going on, breakups going on, crushes going on, that I don't think I was following all of them. There was the big event to save the bookstore, and now I'm wondering, like, that must mean that Empire Records is about saving a record store. And like, do they do it at the end? Because I don't want to spoil this. The ending of this is interesting. It definitely wasn't as clear of a romance, obviously, from the last thing that I read from her. It was overall just a different vibe than, not what I was looking for, but what I'm used to with her writing. And like, can I enjoy her just like co-worker dynamics the same way that I can her romantic relationships? Clearly not. But I don't know that I take issue with anything in here. It's just that I'll probably never think about this again. Today, I've decided to start in On the Weight of Our Sky. And as I've been discussing like why these books sat on my TBR shelf for so long, I forgot the reason for this one, and I just read the author's note, and it's all coming back to me. So I forgot that a reason I picked up this book is because it has OCD representation. And then I read the author's note probably like when I picked it up and wanted to read it, and she has a great discussion at the beginning, including some content description and warnings. And talks about how it includes graphic violence, death, racism, OCD, and anxiety triggers. And I remember starting this and being like, that's cool, like I'm good. And then I started the book, and it starts out with some very like violent visions from this girl about like what's happening to her mom. I have harm-based OCD, and it seems this might also be something that this character is dealing with. I have definitely intentionally avoided, or at least not sought out, representation like this. It's funny because I can read something like a social media thing and be like, oh well, does this represent, you know, being a YouTuber accurately? But for some reason with this, I just don't want to put myself in a position where someone thinks I'm trying to speak for a group of people. And a huge thing in the author's note is her talking about how at this time in this place in the world, OCD definitely wasn't diagnosed as such, and there was a big stigma, continues to be a stigma about this type of thing. Also in the first chapter when she's talking about this, she is associating it with a jinn in her life. And I definitely don't want to say anything, get anything wrong. But as she says in the author's note, for Muslims, jinn are real. They aren't just wacky blue creatures with a Robin Williams voice or mythical beings that pour out of old lamps and ancient rings to grant you 3 wishes. They exist for us in ways they may not for you. So in this context, Melody would believe she's being controlled by a jinn instead of consulting a mental health professional. So those are all important things to keep in mind, for me to keep in mind while I'm reading. This book takes place over such a short period of time that it lends itself well to reading really quickly. But for me, I spent quite a while reading it. It's a really heavy situation, and it's a good book because it gives you like historical knowledge about a situation that perhaps you may not know about, but also tells it in such a small, intimate, personal story that you feel connected to this character and her family, and there's just so many emotions that come along with this book. Oh, my book look of the day. I mean, the mauve and the mauve, I think I killed it. But not quite the outfit situation. But I feel like I'm doing layers, and that works. This book was so powerful, I recommend it to everyone. teens, adults. Like, I think this really spans age range. I think a lot of people can get something out of this. I don't know why I went into this a little bit like worried about how it was gonna go, because in another universe this is an epic like romance. Just the way that the cover looks, like hopping on the back of a guy's bike and like, we're gonna go save someone and we're also gonna fall in love. I did think that was gonna be kind of the vibe, and I didn't know how to feel about it because there's so much going on. There's rioting, there's like people are dying all around them. I didn't know how this relationship was going to be handled, and it was handled perfectly because it's not about them. They work together and they are trying to find different family members and help people. We have Melody, and then she meets up with this guy named Vincent, and he's Chinese, she's Malay, and so they're not supposed to get along, and everything that's going on outside of their houses and on the streets, there's this separation between communities, but they have like the same goal. And it's obviously saying a lot like subtextually about like not judging people, and that, you know, we all have things in common, and a lot of things that a lot of YA books like cover as a topic. But this obviously isn't like a history that I've read before, characters I've read before, so it's just really interesting. I'm giving it 4.5 stars. It really is about her and her OCD. Like, that's not a side thing. That's not a little bit of the story. It's not just like a little bit of representation. Like, it is the story. It's her in these pressure situations, figuring out how to deal with her OCD, but not knowing that it's OCD. She's trying to track down her mom. She's trying to help other people. She is like in hiding. She has to just stay in these strangers' home who some don't necessarily want her there. And all the while she is going through these rituals, and I just loved how everything was handled, because it's not about her like overcoming something. It's not this unrealistic story of like, well, when she's put in these circumstances, she just gets over what she's going through. Like, no, she has to, every step of the way, encounter her intrusive thoughts and like work through everything. I don't know if it's a spoiler to say where the title comes from, so you can skip ahead if that's something that matters to you. There's basically this Malay saying that translates to, where you plant your feet is where you hold up the sky. Which means like when you're an outsider and you're entering a community, you, as like a respect thing, you go along with the customs. You do what is expected of you to like fit in, and you just have to like survive your circumstances. Since they chose to live in this neighborhood, the people who run the neighborhood, you know, bad or good, they have to go along with what is expected. So maybe they pay a higher fee to this gang, and it's about the weight that comes along with being an outsider and the things that this family and this community has had to endure. And I just thought that was such a powerful interaction. And this book is not one tone. It's like heartbreaking and it's sad, but it's hope-filled, and it's just really raw. And I think it's a book that deserves like you to take your time, and I really felt like a part of this book. I haven't spent this long reading one book in a while, and it was just a really wonderful experience, and I can't believe I get to read another book from her like next month. I'm so excited. My book look of the day is just, look, there's a little drapey sleeve moment on this shirt, and this is not a horror. This is a Western, a low fantasy Western fairy tale vibes. So good. I mean, horror can mean a lot of things, and it can exist in a lot of different realms, so sure, horror. I need to know, like, I don't want to do a deep dive on Goodreads, but I need to, because I need to understand why people don't like this. Of all of the books that I talked about reading for this video, this is the one that people try to dissuade me from the most, and I need to understand. I think the only real bummer about this is, honestly, there's something in every single Josh Malerman that makes me go, ugh. Like, why did you have to say that one thing? In this one, as with many real fairy tales, the characters with disabilities are not treated properly, written properly, in a way that everybody can enjoy the book. Oh my gosh, it has a 3.3 average rating. That means this would have been really close to making it in my reading lowest rated books video if I had kept going and picked a couple more. It seems like, one, because it's not horror, which they were expecting. Two, it's not so much about Carol, it's about like a lot of men in her life. I think three, they just didn't really get like the point of the story or enjoy how it was written. So I'm giving it a 4.5. The last time I read like a Western-y book, I also gave it a really high rating. I don't know what that means for me, because I was once asked this question that was like, what's a genre you never read or you could never see yourself reading? And I said Westerns, because it was the only thing that came to mind. That's a genre I don't read. But I just feel like there were some weirdly similar vibes between this and Blood Red Road. I definitely can't recommend this to everyone. I don't even know who the audience of this is. It is weird, but not like nonsensical, and it is like a little predictable. It's not full of twists and turns and reveals. It's just like this story of a woman trying to get back to her life. So she falls into these little comas. Her husband's the only one who knows. And in one of these comas, he decides to take advantage of the situation and pretends that she's dead and convinces everyone that she's dead. But there's a man in another town who finds out about it, and he's like, not my Carol. And so he, you know, gets on his horse and he's coming to town. But then there's someone else following him, and there's like all of these mysterious kind of characters all plotting against each other. And I'm sorry, but this chapter right here, Smoke Doesn't Sleep Catches Up to Moxie, has one of the most disturbing dialogue moments for me in a book. Like, I was very, not in a gross way, just, it got very intense. I highly recommend the audiobook. I'm so bummed I didn't read this sooner. And that makes me really wonder about the next Josh Malerman I have on my shelves that I had for a very long time that everyone tells me sucks. It's just like Carol in her coma, knowing everything that's going on around her, and her trying to like get out of it and waiting for, it's a very damsel in distress story. It's not particularly romantic. I feel like it could have leaned that way. It could have been like this sweeping romantic gesture, but it wasn't so much. Imagine if it was. Oh my god, I probably would have given it 5 stars. But it's very intense and kind of brooding. But it's really not focused on her. It's more about like the men, the doctors who are questioning what's going on, and the men chasing after other men, trying to save her, trying to kill her. It was just really fun, especially once it took off. Like the second half of this, incredible. I did not expect this to be my favorite of the video, but that's where we're at right now, and we're almost done. I think this is the closest green that I have to the cover of this. So here's my not so matching look of the day. I don't have a blue polka dot shirt. That's not how I pictured this woman to look. This is pretty similar to all of the Sophie Kinsella I've ever read, where we're following a woman who's just like not really sure what's going on in life. Like, she's making transitions from one job to another, one relationship to another. At some point she always goes and like hangs out with her family, and they ground her and they show her like what really matters in life. I haven't read a Sophie Kinsella for the first time in like 5 years. I've reread some recently, but I thought it was like a decent story. No, more than decent. I'm giving it a 4. It's better than I thought it would be. So the pitch is part love story, part workplace drama. The love story really didn't come into play for a while. She was just kind of pining after this guy. She also often has her characters falling in love with their bosses, which is interesting and not my favorite dynamic. So we're following a girl named Katie. She has a boss named Demeter, and she ends up firing her pretty early in the book, even though Katie's like doing her best and she cares about her job and she wants to have more responsibility, and she has a lot of like passion and ambition. But there's basically this weird situation with that woman and then a guy who's like in charge of the company too. And there seems to be like this weird maybe jealousy thing going on. And so Katie gets let go, but she had this little like moment with this guy. And then she ends up going to stay with her parents, and well, her dad and her stepmom are opening up this like vacation slash farm, and it reminded me kind of the vibes of The Undomestic Goddess, where we have a woman who's working in the corporate world and like doesn't know a lot about kind of domestic or more physical tasks and is thrown into this whole new world. But in this one, she's actually like interested in learning and she wants to help out, and she has experience with farms and horses in the past. She's just like getting into this vacation kind of business, so it's new to her, but she's taking pieces from her childhood and from her corporate life and like putting them together to successfully run this business. And it's weird because I thought this book was going to be a lot about social media, and that was the one thing that has been putting me off from this for so many years, is I've been like, I know I'm gonna enjoy it, it's Sophie Kinsella, but I think this one is about like a social media star or having a social media presence, and like the moral of the story is gonna be like, even though someone on the internet looks like their life is perfect. It's not really. And I just think that's such an annoying premise to a book. Like it says my not so perfect life, and then in here it talks about the judgments we make in a social media obsessed world. And then it says, no wonder Katie takes refuge in not quite true Instagram posts, which like isn't really the plot at all of this book. I just assumed there was going to be this moment that every book has that tries to talk about social media, where there's this like situation where someone gets exposed for their life not being what they created on Instagram, and then it leads to that discussion about how you can't make your life look perfect. But that was not the plot. Like her even posting on Instagram was barely even mentioned. I get why it was pitched that way, because this is kind of a hard book to describe, but it's more about like her trying to get revenge on this woman who fired her because she comes and stays at the vacation place. That is briefly mentioned in here, so that's not a spoiler. But she like takes out her frustrations on this woman, and then it leads to her finding out things that she didn't know before she was fired. And I really liked Katie as a character because she never really changed in what she wanted. And that's something that I see in Sophie Kinsella's work a lot, is we hear about a character who was a lawyer and then they go to learn how to clean a house and it changes their entire perspective on life. And now she never wants to go back to that situation, and this is her new destiny. But in this one, Katie and her staying at the farm was very much a temporary thing, and she always wanted to get back, and she had big goals and dreams the entire time. So yeah, I thought it was generally good. I don't feel like this is something that I would pick up current day, like from an author I'd never read before, being pitched the way that it's pitched, but I'm glad that I got to read it. Sophie Kinsella is always like an enjoyable, good author. She writes well. She writes funny scenes, she writes compelling characters, she writes believable dialogue, and I'm never like disappointed by her stuff. So that is that. Okay, final book I read is A World Without You by Beth Revis. And this is probably the worst I've done at matching the cover, because it's like striped. No, maybe it's not that bad. It's just like pink, but that's red. Actually, tell me the best outfit match and tell me the worst outfit match I did in the comments below. So my overall rating of this is a 3, and I actually feel the exact same as I did about Challenger Deep. I felt the same about Challenger Deep as I do about this. It handles really similar topics, though obviously like every single mental health thing that people are going through is going to be different, and the stories are different, the takeaways are different. I don't want to lump this style of book all together, but I feel like as far as teen books, I have gotten as much out of this type of story as I possibly can. Like, they are all going to be so similar in certain ways, where our character is clearly going through something, is getting professional help, but a good portion of the book is part of like their idea of reality. So in this one, he thinks he can time travel, and it is based on Beth Revis's like own experience having a brother who has things in common with this main character. And Beau has a sister named Sophia, and I think that this actually does a really respectful job, because I feel like there are books out there, and I know I don't think I've read a lot of them, but I've seen a lot of critiques out there about books that aren't necessarily about the character who's having a mental health crisis or who has a disability or what have you, and it's about their sibling. And their sibling like obviously has their own story to tell, and their experience is important. They are a human being. But what that type of book often does is put that character who is going through something as a burden, and doesn't explore that character much beyond that, and therefore isn't a book that is like, I don't want to say safe or comfortable, but I can't think of any other better words, for that community who is dealing with the same thing. Like, it's not a positive thing for them to get to read. And there's a whole conversation about like who should be able to tell what story, and I'm not going to get into that, but I think this book is really thoughtfully written, and based on all of the little post-its, you can tell, and a lot of the actual situations and conversations that happen, you learn are things that Beth and her brother talked about. And so in the story, he believes that he can time travel, and he took his friend to a different time and left her there. But in reality, it's about her having taken her own life. And everyone around him is telling him that, but he feels like and knows that this school has to be for kids who have extraordinary abilities because he knows he can time travel. I think it was well done. I think it was thoughtful, and this is where it gets into weird territory about rating books, because like had I read this as a teen, because it's for teens, would I have rated it higher? Is it disrespectful for me to give it a 3 because my enjoyment was, I didn't feel super impacted by the story, though I know that it's important and it took a lot of time and care, and this is an important story for her to tell. I think this could be incredibly impactful for a lot of readers. I don't think that you're missing out on anything. Like, the book is the book as the book wanted to be written, and the post-its do add a little behind the scenes thing, but it's not like it's giving away secrets or anything that you wouldn't be able to get from like an author interview. And mostly the post-its were tied to like, this referenced this piece of media in my childhood. So like, I can't remember any of them now, but it was like, there's this iconic movie where a character wears red shoes, so I decided to put my character in red shoes, and it's just a little nod to something that isn't important for the story itself because it never mentions that media, that character never watches that media, but it lets you in on like her writing process and things that she like watches and cares about. So quick recap, I read 6 books for this video. I started with The Darkness Outside Us and gave it 4.5 stars. I read This Is All Your Fault and gave it, what did I give this? 3.5 stars? I read The Weight of Our Sky and gave it 4 stars. I read Unburied Carol and gave it 4.5 stars. My Not So Perfect Life and gave it 4 stars? My memory right now. And A World Without You, 3 stars. And the cool thing about these two is I have now read every single book off of my 2016 and 2017 most anticipated lists. Somebody left a fun comment asking if I could look back on my most anticipated lists and talk about the success of each one with the books that I have actually read. And I put them into categories of either I liked them, like these are all the ones I've read, either I liked them or I didn't like them. Because I still have a bunch I haven't read, but of the ones I have read, it was 60% like and 40% dislike in 2016. In 2017, it was 63% like and 37% dislike. So it went up a little bit, like I'm liking books a little more, getting more into my taste. If we look at 2018, it drops. So only 50% of the books that were my most anticipated that I read, I liked, and 50% I did not like of my own most anticipated. How sad. If we look at 2019, it goes up. 68% liked, 32% disliked. Then in 2020, it goes down a little bit. This seems totally in line with everything that I've ever said about my channel. 2019 is where I peaked. I read everything that I loved. It was a fantastic reading year. I look back on it so fondly. And then 2020 was a flop. I guess 2018 was more of a flop because 2020 was 54% liked, 46% disliked. So I'm not improving constantly, which is a bummer. And then the most shocking one here is 2021, where 28% of my most anticipated reads I liked. 72% I disliked of the books that I thought I would love so much and I couldn't wait to pick up. I didn't like 72% of them. Like, I know that we know 2021 wasn't like a great reading year either, but did you know it was that bad for me? Anyway, that's everything that we learned. Thanks for hanging out with me. I've been filming this over the last couple weeks. I'm now not feeling great, but I'm really excited to have gotten some things off of my TBR shelf. And I know one's from the library, but I'm gonna go out and buy that one now because that's just how I live my life. Thanks very much for watching and answering any questions that I posed throughout this video. And I'm excited to do a part 2 where I read your top rated ones. I already know what some of them are gonna be, but now that I've cleaned off 2 of those entire lists, there's gonna be some more recent releases. So like, does that go against the whole idea of the video? I don't know. I'm gonna have fun though, and I'll see you then. Well, I'll see you before then, but I will also see you then.